Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Yeah, we've really got a great guest for you today on the program. We have John Walsh, who's the founder and CEO of Endera Specialty Vehicles out of Ottawa, Ohio. John has a long and storied career, many C-level positions in multiple venture-backed technology companies. He's got experience in the manufacturing and industrial sector, working on everything from armored vehicles to specialty aircraft manufacturing. John's participated in the prestigious Peter Thiel Fellowship Summit. He's appeared on ABC Shark Tank. He's an international public speaker. He's received multiple awards, including being publicly recognized by world leaders in an honorary roundtable event by the White House. He's attended the prestigious university programs at MIT and Caltech. He was a Forbes under 30 spotlight member and a member also of the Young Presidents Organization in LA. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Wayne.
Yeah, it's great. I think, in this program, we look for the leadership lessons among, great key executives like yourself. So thanks for being with us. If I, asked you a little bit about Endera Specialty Vehicles, would you share a little bit about that for us?
Sure. Yeah, and there's a specialty automaker. We're located in Ottawa, Ohio, and we specialize in mid-size shuttle bus and Type A school buses. Big growth area for us is electrification. About 25% of our sales came from electric last year. We think that can go up to 35% this year. And
Mhm.
we're the fastest growing specialty bus company in the country right now. So we're super excited about the future.
So what percentage of your parts and capabilities are based in the US versus externally?
So over 70% of our vehicle content is made in America. We have that as a
Great.
requirement in most of the customer segments that we serve. We sell to airports and transit agencies that leverage federal money to procure their state transportation equipment. So over
Mhm.
70% of the vehicle content is typically required to be made in America.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think it's a fantastic base to build a business on. So if you think about this space and the competitors you're going up against, what's your competitive advantage? What's the big thing that keeps pushing you forward? I think you're the fastest growing company of your type in the industry.
Yeah, we are. And there's only about five players in this market that are serving this sector that we serve, and they're all 60 plus year old companies. And so
Mm,
we're 8 years old, but we've been able to get market share pretty quickly. And building a
mhm,
quality bus and having unmatched customer service is definitely core to our company's values. And I would say the benchmark is pretty low in this sector. When certain players have somewhat looked at this product, the buses that we produce as a commodity, uh, where I would say the market does have a value put on quality, that we've been able to be the fair valued alternative that has superior quality and customer service. So that's been core to our company's values. On the electrification front, we're the only vertically integrated EV maker in the country in our segment
mhm.
that has
Okay.
our own powertrain technology and also does our own body manufacturing. And I somewhat stumbled across that value proposition when I first was started. And I noticed that you couldn't get an electric bus built from one person.
Yeah,
And so you had a powertrain provider that
right,
you didn't know if they were going to be here today, out of business tomorrow. And then
right.
you had a bodybuilder that was super old school, didn't want to change their processes. And then you had a chassis provider, and then you had to make them all work together. And that was really a lot easier said than done. And there are a lot of inefficiencies to that. And so that's how I got started, was as I was using
Yeah.
other people's powertrains, and I had a contract manufacturer and we were the brand, but we saw an opportunity to vertically integrate. And
Mhm.
that was easier said than done. There's a lot of pain and suffering throughout that process and,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
scaling. And so we bought a legacy automaker in Ottawa, Ohio's
Hmm.
a merged company that would part was a former Winnebago bus division
Hmm.
and then a Type A school bus maker that was owned by a defense contractor and so it
Yeah.
gave us the bare bones to really have a strong competitive moat in this EV segment that is I would say small in size relative today, but relative to the market today, but growing rapidly, right? You've got fuel and maintenance cost savings. You have fixed routes. You have slow charging overnight with level two
Right.
charging in these industrial
Right.
depots that already have the power draw to it. And so there's for this market, there's a lot of favorable properties to go electric. So
Yeah.
we believe it's going to be a very important market from an electrification standpoint over the next 10 years.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you and I have chatted a little bit before we got on this recording, and it just makes a little bit more sense in the especially bus arena than it does just for individual consumers because of the factors that you just mentioned. And that understanding of very specific routes where you understand the mileage you're going to be running each day, the overnight slow charging, that isn't necessarily always the luxury for someone who's using a vehicle as their primary vehicle in their lives, right? So I
Yeah.
think it does make a lot of sense. And also the life of the bus as well. So the earn back period and the number of miles that's on the road over time, allows you to get into that earn back period for a little bit
Yeah.
more expensive powertrain. So there's a lot of things that make sense there. So yeah, good for you. Let's go back to that vertically integrated piece a little bit. I know yeah, like I said, appropriately, it's a lot of pain and suffering to get it done sometimes, but it is always great from a customer point of view to have a one-stop shop in many respects, and especially not just on the front end of the deal, but on the back end as well. To have someone who's going to stand behind all the components of the vehicle, and as you pointed out, not a separate powertrain provider, and different motivations than maybe what the owner of the whole business would have in dealing with them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the vertical integration is done because of the ease and ability to service the customer and to make sure that the customer is taken care of because the customer just wants a bus from one person. It's super simple concept, and then they want to make sure that that company that they're buying from is going to be the one standing by the product. So
Absolutely.
when you look at what the alternative was before we entered, which was something went wrong and you had a powertrain company and then a bodybuilder involved in building the bus, problem is
Mhm.
accountability. And when you have one person building one part, another person building another part, who's responsible for the FMVSS compliance of the entire bus?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a
And
good point.
it brings up a safety issue, but at the same time, when things go wrong, they all start pointing fingers at each other, right? And
Hmm.
then the client suffers. The dealer's involved too, and then but the dealer doesn't really have much control if they can't service the product. So customers just want to know that they have a quality bus and
Hmm.
that someone's going to take care of them. And vertically integrating accomplishes that.
Yeah, it does. So how many different products do you have in your portfolio? Do you have a more of a set of products at any point in time, or do you do a lot of bespoke vehicle development for customers to their specifications?
Yeah, good question. So we have our commercial product line, which is what you would see at an airport or a
Hmm.
hotel or
Hmm.
university, corporate campus, hospital,
Right.
transit agency, like a paratransit shuttle operation, a
Yep.
public ride service,
Yeah.
uh, the connector buses, not those big articulate buses.
Mm.
Seeing a move to our bus size because these 70 passenger buses just patterns of life have changed in terms of how it was 20, 30 years ago. And
Hmm.
and so having smaller vehicles that you can more agilely deploy are preferred now. And you see those procurements rising. The other area that we have is the school bus product line, which is the
Hmm.
type A school bus, so special needs school bus, daycare
Hmm.
buses, activity buses, and
Right.
those are typically serving the school sector, with 90% of it being the yellow bus that you see for public school.
Hmm. Hmm.
We do have adjacent products that we've started building. Like we do prison bus, we do
Okay.
mobile medical,
Hmm.
those types of specialty applications. Those are not very frequently done. There are areas
Okay.
we're looking at more closely now. But I would say that the majority of our customer segment or our market is public or public derived.
Hmm. Good. Yeah, that's interesting. So if you look forward in this kind of sector of the vehicle business, do you see any big challenges ahead that we haven't had in the past that you're concerned about? And also, are there big opportunities out there that you see that you think is going to, push this business ahead?
Yeah. So right now, there's definitely a challenge in the federal government with funding certainty to
Hmm.
states
Hmm.
that has caused turbulence in our market segment. Now, one thing is it just depends on where we sell the government, right? I mean that's most of
Right.
the market, and so when state agencies don't know when they're going to get their next budget approved or how much
Right.
it's going to be discretionary or not, there's lumpiness in procurement cycles. Um, I would say in terms of the future, it's going to be very interesting with AI and autonomy, where the world's going to head, what the patterns of life are going to be, and how people are going to be moved among society. I would say that there's moderately high level of certainty that people are going to need to be moved around
Hmm.
the planet,
Yeah.
irrespective
Yeah.
of what's going to happen with this AI wave, which gives us a strong degree of confidence that regardless of what that looks like, we'd be
Hmm.
providing the equipment for that. Uh,
Hmm.
I see an interesting opportunity in software. We provide a software platform to our customers that allows us to improve the customer experience by
Hmm.
having an app solution where riders can see when their bus is going to arrive. They can see the seat availability. They can
Okay. Right.
communicate with their operators for lost and found purposes. If they lose something, they can give feedback, which say is more bent to the negative than the positive, just
Hmm.
inherently. But we've been unique in our ability to develop technology versus the
Yeah.
old school metal bender bodybuilders that
Right.
really know what a kilowatt hour is in a lot of respects. And so we've been able to develop software tools to help enhance the customer experience. And we've seen positive receptiveness to that just because we've customized it for our customers
Good.
versus the out of the box solutions they're used to getting to satisfy their requirements, particularly with like airports that you have reporting requirements with the operators that serve the airports, and
Hmm.
we've been able to automate a lot of that. And so I see huge opportunity with software and the ability to implement Uber-like solutions for public transit that enhance the customer experience.
Yeah, I would say that's a biggie. That's a big competitive advantage. And I think, given that you're mostly US based and that you're heavily vertically integrated, you can also perhaps move to some of the software-defined vehicle capabilities on the vehicle side, not just the customer benefit, as you mentioned, that would allow, things like safety and, recall updates to be done, electronically, faster, smoother, more efficient, and a lot of other different aspects. If you wanted, if an owner of the bus wanted an upgrade, a capability, being able to upgrade that electronically via the wire, I think would be a good way to do it. So, yeah, good on you. That's great. So let's transition to the part of the program that we focus on here. We love to hear the real world stories of key executives like yourself because there's always some great instruction in that. Will you tell us a story? Could be from the past, could be current, could be a success or a failure. It doesn't really matter. Tell us a real world story that you think we'd be interested in. You can set it up and let's talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Well, where do I start? I'll start with a painful one. You know, you have to have a high pain tolerance to start a company, and you have to be sufficiently determined to succeed. You have to believe in your vision, but also not be blinded to fall subject to the perseverance myth if the writing on the wall doesn't make sense. But I remember a few years ago when I raised my first round of money, and it was in 2020, which was the height of the EV SPAC boom,
Hmm.
and we had predominantly an EV focused uh, mission narrative, but
Hmm.
we quickly saw that we needed to scale a legacy business because that
Hmm.
gave us a degree of resilience, and I had avoided going public, which I'm so thankful I did, given that all these companies that went public are no longer with us.
Hmm.
And but I raised money for 2 years of runway to get to the next set of milestones to prevent dilution
Hmm.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
raise, your follow-on round to support that next phase of milestones and growth. And it was very, very like VC style structured.
Right.
The structure was done with that in mind, but the markets turned, and so then we had to find ways to raise capital, and we went from doing a price round to a convertible note, and
Mhm.
we struggled in that time, right? And people were transitioning from thinking that that the internal combustion engine business at first wasn't a sexy
Right.
part of the story to then being a
Right.
sexy part,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I mean, there's like a saying where you're not a real CEO unless you stare death in the face. Uh, and well, I mean, there was a point in time where we were like 6 weeks from running out of cash. I had like
Right. Right.
a couple payroll periods left, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of get to this existential crisis where you're like, if I don't do this, I'm dead, right?
Hmm.
And you get somewhat of a sobering, uh, almost like a survival instinct kicks in,
Right.
where you get 20/20 vision on what you need to do. Sometimes your best
Hmm.
work actually comes out of those high pressure moments if you're that type.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I had to raise an emergency round. I'd call all of our investors and I'd explain to them, what
Hmm.
we're doing and why, we have this strategy, and why it's important, that they participate, and um, made it through it, right?
Hmm.
Say it at the end of the day, save the company. Now, I still have this paranoia always of, I think the trauma from those moments of
Hmm.
when you go back there, right? That you can use to drive you. But um, there's a lot of people that talk about these high rosy, these like, high growth companies, and these awesome stories of a guy who overnight just, started this company. It was a radical success. But I don't think that's actually true in most cases. I think
Yeah.
there's
An
a lot.
exception.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain and suffering that goes on behind the scenes to get a company where it needs to be, and, you know, to a success level. And, sometimes you have to stare death in the face.
Yeah. That's a good story. Let me ask you a question. How many people did you have on your leadership team with you at that point in time when you were facing these tough decisions?
The leadership team, about five or six core
Okay.
people, excluding
Yeah.
me. Uh,
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just curious, with that team, while you were, as you say, staring death in the face as well, and you had to kind of continue to reinvent the compelling investment thesis for your investors to do the emergency round, et cetera. Were you able to inspire and motivate your team at the same time? Because some people don't have the same resilience. Everybody's got a different quotient there, my
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a super hard one, right? Is in times where, you're navigating turbulent waters to still instill confidence and clarity in the company's vision, and instill belief in
Hmm.
it, and to hold the frame together, right? It's
Yeah.
it's super critical, and I think that reiterating the clarity in our vision, why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, uh,
Hmm.
making it very clear what we're up against and what we're facing, and to
Hmm.
get everybody rallied around together to help get through that is super important. And having that bond with your team, I think, is really important
It
because,
is.
if you just get people who you don't actually build a relationship with that are ready to go to war with you, so to speak, then the second there is a struggle, those teams tend to collapse and people tend to run for the hills versus getting that
Right.
team that is willing to get through the tough times with you and celebrate the good times.
Yeah. In my experience, I do a lot of executive coaching as well. And what I find is some leaders question why their team won't follow them. And a couple of the things that it sounds like you've avoided during the tough period like that is number one, have unfaltering belief, maybe not in your own mind sometimes, but the way you represent the company and represent the opportunity and to encourage your team. So that's a key component as we talked about. And then I think the other thing in general is when you get into a crisis, you need to be calm. You need to be unflappable as a leader. And you need to be that one in the room who's making the properly prioritized objective decisions about where you need to go. So congrats on pulling that off as well, because that gets difficult. And I think the third thing I'd point out that's really an incredibly important leadership principle for the CEO or the person who's, the top dog of the day is that you're not going to be able to pull this off in the moment unless you've already built the trust and the admiration beforehand, all along the way, right? You said it in a different way. You said built the relationship with the people. So obviously you've done that. We're saying the same thing. I'm just
Yeah.
amplifying. I agree with your point of view because I've had people I'm coaching ask me, why is it that I'm having trouble getting my team to, follow the directions I'm giving? And, it's a very tough question to answer because I have to look them in the eye and say they don't admire you, they don't respect you.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, you need to make sure, especially, in today's world, I think servant leaders are the ones who actually are the most successful in our environment and our culture. And I think it's the right way we should live our lives anyway, honoring other people, mutual human respect, and shared responsibility is kind of the foundational elements I always kind of lean back on. But that's a great story to just amplify the the importance of what characteristics a leader needs to have to get through tough times. And so the story continued. Obviously, you were able to raise the emergency round. The investors bought your new investment thesis or the extension of that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no, no, they did, right? I mean, it ultimately saved the company, and I can't say we haven't had, more than one of those types of instances over the 8 years
Right.
that we've been around, and but it comes down to you have to have a team that you've built that is each individual is there because they know more than you in a given area of their
Sure.
expertise, and I- I'm
Hmm.
I'm not the engineer type CEO founder, so.
Hmm.
I, admittedly, it's like there's so many different areas that I don't know, but I know that, I need to find someone, right? So it's like knowing what you don't
Hmm.
know, but then also
Right.
cultivating a, a culture where people are very comfortable to communicate how they really feel.
Hmm.
Important. I've seen a lot of
Critically important.
where leaders don't cultivate the type of culture where brutal honesty or, disagreements with the CEO, right, are
Yeah.
not embraced for fear of, going against whatever the
Mhm.
leader says and whatever
Yeah.
ramifications might, be assumed to be instilled as a result of doing that,
Yeah.
because then you just don't get the truth and you don't get a best ideas one approach. Um, and then when you get buy-in from the team with their ideas, or the team feels comfortable that they can disagree and that those disagreements actually result in action, then they end up feeling more able to implement change, or that their ideas are heard. And then
Hmm.
it gets their buy-in,
Yes.
or so. Then if all of a sudden they don't feel like they can do that, So I think those are super important things if you're trying to cultivate a, team that's ready to go to
Yeah.
battle.
Yeah, one that's really truly collaborative instead of, in fear, as you said, to speak their mind. Things have changed. I know I'm a couple of years older than you are. Back in the day, it was very difficult in some environments to speak your mind because the whole leadership principles were very different. And
Sure.
you got one mistake would cancel 20 great wins, and it was
Yeah.
very harsh and very difficult. So it caused you to be cautious. But being that cautious and fear-based in a leadership structure is really stifling of collaborative problem solving. It stifles innovation itself. So I think you're exactly right. And just to wrap on this, I think during the time I heard you say 2020, you were in the throes of COVID at the time, and there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So you must have done one heck of a job selling your investors. Because during that time, there were a lot of people who were just nervous, right? And didn't know what the future was going to look like. So for them to pony up more cash during a time like that, and when they didn't even know where the specialty vehicle industry was going or anything was going, was exceptionally well done on your part.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Wayne. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that the first round was really easy because there
yeah,
was this euphoria in the SPAC IPO
right.
market
Yeah.
coming tomorrow, and there's
Hmm.
all these PowerPoint companies is what I'll call it, but basically
Yeah,
companies with
yeah,
nothing more than an idea that were going public that shouldn't
yeah,
have been public, and you didn't have any accountability brought to the financial projections that these companies were putting
yeah,
in back presentations. You had a safe harbor
yeah,
provision for all of these bankers that they
right.
didn't have any recourse based on whatever they printed,
Yeah,
and so you had a structural issue that created a bubble, and then when that bubble bursted was really when the challenge came, and that the COVID times from an operational perspective were really difficult.
right,
We couldn't get chassis because the computer chip shortage just
right.
bottlenecked Ford and all these different suppliers. Uh,
Yeah,
and then there was a release, but then the capital markets interest rates went through the roof. Inflation. I mean,
yeah,
like 2022 is it's like every month our suppliers were just hitting us with new price increases, and you do have a resiliency to inflation in this market because all these state contracts have PPI provisions where every year you just get the PPI, you somewhat hedge against inflation, but it's an
yeah,
annual, right? So
right.
it's not like you can get these monthly PPIs, right? So, you're kind of sucking wind for that 11 months that we had the
Sure, sure.
hyperinflation, and then just interest rates really suffocated the market. So the capital markets were not as the equity markets were not as vibrant. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough time. It's an interesting time to start and scale a business. I thought when I had done our first airport order and then COVID hit, I was like, oh, I'm so screwed, right?
Mhm.
Because it's airports, and
Yeah, of
the airport
course.
shut down. But we were on the liability side of the balance sheet because they had to buy these buses that we originally sold. We weren't
Yeah,
on the P and L, the operating line.
right,
They could just
right, right.
sing. So
Yeah,
we got lucky.
yeah. You mentioned SPAC a couple of times, especially purpose acquisition company.
Yeah.
Would you kind of just give the viewers who might not understand what was going on with SPACs and kind of pooling investment, just real quickly, a small tutorial? I hate
Yeah.
to I hate to have a lot of acronyms in the program that others might not
Sure.
understand.
Sure, yeah. So special purpose acquisition company is an entity that has cash sitting in a trust account that is registered on a public exchange with the intention of acquiring a pilot company. So basically the public company acquires a private company, but the private company becomes the main company at the end. So
Mhm.
there's somewhat of a reverse dynamic to it. And it was very popular as a means to go public because you didn't have to circumvent you somewhat got to circumvent the traditional IPO route where you had like a red herring roadshow event and you sold the securities to the bankers. The bankers weren't able to put forecasts. They had financial liability associated with the underwriting of what that stock price was going to be printed at, and you wanted to promote your IPO and you had minimum revenue recognition requirements for like I think it was like 10
Right.
million minimum for 3 years, three tax returns.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
don't have any of that when going public
Hmm.
via SPAC.
Yeah.
So it became an effective means and an expedited path to go public. And and basically the people who had sponsored the SPAC, the shares are at $10. They could
Mm.
choose if they like the deal or not, and then they would be able to redeem their money. And so in the beginning, you had no redemptions, and everybody just the stocks flew. So then all the people who
Hmm.
put the money in the trust account for the SPAC, basically if the stock traded above $10, they'd be in the money. But
Hmm.
then as these companies started materializing, they were not able to keep up with the forecast that they originally
Right. Right.
hit, that the stock started going down, 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 and then all of a sudden the new SPACs coming online, you have higher and higher redemptions of people saying, "Nah, I don't think
Mhm.
I want to do that deal,"
Right.
right?
Not as attractive. Yeah. Not as
Yeah,
attractive.
then you basically had these companies that were going public that would even just get very little cash out of the transaction.
Right. Right.
Um, and now, but all the public company overhead costs. And so, the SEC tightened it up later on and, made the bankers have liability
Right.
to whatever the numbers were that they were pitching. But yeah, it's basically a means to go public if you don't want to go the traditional route or you don't qualify for the traditional
Or you
route.
don't qualify. Yeah. Too small. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So anyway, well, thanks for that. Appreciate it. So as we wrap up our conversation today, John, what I would like to do is ask you a couple of questions. These are typical questions I ask of all the guests, and it helps to provide a little incremental insight. The first one is, let's rewind. You're still a young man, but let's rewind 20 years and tell us what you've learned now. What piece of advice would you like to tell your younger self, so that if you could possibly do that?
I would tell my younger self to slow down and slowly load my rifle and have a higher hit rate rather
Yeah,
than try to do too many things
yeah,
too quickly and dilute yourself. I
hmm,
think there's an inherent tendency to want to fill time void with
yeah,
action, and then there's this inherent tendency for entrepreneurially minded people to have ADD and someone
hmm,
get caught with all the different opportunities that come across their plate, and then to want to say yes to all those things. Saying no to things is equally as important. And
yeah.
I would have slowly loaded my rifle and and reserved my energy um, rather than
Yeah, good advice. I was smiling when you said it because I get that exact same answer in different formats, but the patience and really the quality over quantity kind of answer comes up a lot. So it's very, very wise, I believe, of those of you who've had that experience before. I think we've all kind of been there. It's the old joke about the young bull and the old bull stopping on, on top of the hill, looking down at the herd, and one
yeah.
being more anxious than the other, and one saying, "Why don't we take our time and do a quality job," right? So it's an interesting perspective. All right, let's fast forward the other way. So you and I are having a beer 20 years from now. We're talking about our lives and our career. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of?
I think about what you want your legacy to be, and as a fundamental driver for what I'm doing, and I would love to have said that I made a positive impact on humanity, and that everything I did, was at the end of the day creating a positive impact on our society. We're living in such an interesting time that it's hard to see and imagine what this world is going to be like in 20 years, 10 years. I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, you could probably had a picture, but it's quite daunting to think that, we're living in this AI age and robotics and everything and what,
Yeah,
the future is going to hold. But, if, I want to sit, 20 years from now, 30 years from now and say, what is my legacy, right? I would have loved to, you know, been able to say that I made a positive impact on humanity.
Yeah.
Love for it.
Yeah. That's really all we can hope for, right? It depends on what your purpose in life is and what your aspirations are to a great extent. But for all of us, regardless of that, I think it makes sense that we want to touch the world in a positive way. And the best way to do that is to just touch everyone you meet in a positive way every day. When I coach key executives, I give them that their prime directive is exactly that. Get up every morning, and before you think of what you're trying to accomplish that day, just realize that your mission is to touch everyone you meet in a positive way. Give them
Yeah.
some encouragement, give them a smile, work through a problem with them, give them assistance if they need it. And honestly, if you make your life about that, it's hard to have a bad life because at the end of the day, you accomplish in spades what you just described you'd like to do as in terms of your legacy. And the good news is if you have the smarts and the experience and the good fortune to be in a significant position of authority as a CEO or a business leader of any kind, your ability to accomplish touching other people in a positive way is just amplified. It's a huge force multiplier.
Um,
So, I'm a follower of Christ, so I like to take scriptural references sometimes. And, there's a scripture that I try to remember. I never quote them exactly correct, but it's something like, too much is given, much is required. And so I think as leaders in businesses, we really do have a lot of skills. We got a lot of talent. We've had a lot of blessed, kind of opportunities for great experiences. So it's incumbent on us that we take all of those things and we try to create good with it. And I used to try to look for those big things that I would do, and I still have a few on my radar that I'm working on, like you. But boy, just doing it one person at a time feels awfully good, and it lets you know that you're on the road to that. So I honor your answer, and I just wanted to amplify it with my own thoughts. So thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I
Appreciate
mean, people got to enjoy the ride, right? And the
it.
ride is enjoyed with other people, and if you look at this and you're like, okay, like we're on this world, right? And we have this one life, and what do you want to make of it, right?
Yeah,
When you're sitting on your deathbed, you want to look back and say, you made a positive impact. And there's so many people that think like, if I just get to hear, I'll be happy, right?
yeah, so
And
true.
not
And
here
they
yet.
never are.
They never are, right? And then when you get to
Right.
that point, then you're not happy. You move the
Yeah.
goals on yourself.
Yeah, you just put it up, you put another target out there you think is going to make you happy.
Yeah. When
You're
the
absolutely right. Yeah. I
even
think that's really the issue because fundamentally a lot of those targets are achievement based, power based,
yeah,
greed based,
yeah,
and those things just don't work. I mean, if you look at the most successful people in our society, great athletes, great actresses, actors, the most popular among us, they have issues like we do. And I might even argue they have more issues than we do because they've been down that road that you just described, where I've got this objective, I get there and I think everything's going to be great, and it's not, right?
yeah,
Whereas if you fundamentally take care of the things that we've just been talking about, where you know that your legacy isn't going to be about the money you made or the achievement you've had or the popularity you've accomplished. It's going to be about the lives you've touched, and it's going to be about how you've built relationships and made a difference in people's lives that will multiply that even further. So, great way to kind of wrap up our conversation with a high ideal. I appreciate that. So, John, I think some of the audience is going to be interested in maybe Endera specialty vehicles or be interested in getting in touch with you and somehow. How would they do that if they wanted to reach out to you and your company?
sure. Yeah, well, you can go on our website at www.enderamotors.com,
Hmm.
Endera
Hmm.
Motors.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I'd certainly like to stay in touch with you and plan to do that. And maybe we'll have a follow-up conversation to this one some days as things begin to emerge. But in the meantime, thank you sincerely for your time and your stories. And I wish you all the best of success, continuing success with your business.
Sounds good, Wayne. Appreciate it.
All the best. God bless. Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember the high road leads to a better place.